Imagine owning billions of dollars, a private jet, luxury homes around the world, and a fortune bigger than most people could ever imagine. Now imagine tax season arrives, and somehow, your tax bill is far smaller than anyone would expect. For ordinary people, the formula seems simple: earn money, receive income, and pay taxes. But at the very top of the wealth pyramid, the game works differently. The richest people in the world don't always build their wealth through a paycheck. They build it through assets, companies, stocks, and investments that can grow in value for decades. And instead of selling those assets and creating taxable income, they use a strategy that allows them to access enormous amounts of money while keeping their wealth intact. A strategy so powerful that it has become one of the most debated financial techniques among the ultra-rich. Because the question isn't just how the world's wealthiest people make billions, the real question is, how do they keep those billions? And why does the system work so differently for them? This is the hidden strategy behind the wealth of the top 0.01%. For most people, wealth has always been measured in one simple way: how much money you earn. You go to work, receive a paycheck, and that paycheck becomes the foundation of your financial life. The more you earn, the more opportunities you have, but your income remains visible, predictable, and easy to track. This is the financial world most people know. But when someone reaches the highest levels of wealth, their reality starts to change completely. A billionaire's fortune is rarely sitting in a bank account waiting to be spent. Instead, it is usually tied to ownership, shares of companies, investments, and assets that can increase in value over years or even decades. And this creates a completely different financial situation. A person with a high salary might earn millions and immediately face taxes on that income. But someone who owns a valuable company can become billions of dollars richer without receiving that increase as regular income. The difference is simple but powerful. Most people build wealth by earning money, while the ultra-wealthy build wealth by owning assets that continue growing. This distinction changes the entire game. Because selling those assets can come with a cost. It means giving up ownership, losing future growth, and potentially creating a large tax bill. So instead of selling, the wealthiest individuals often look for another way to use their fortune, a way to access money, while keeping the assets that made them rich in the first place. And this is where their financial strategy begins to separate from the path most people are familiar with. This strategy is built around three simple moves that have shaped how some of the wealthiest people manage their fortunes. They buy valuable assets, borrow against those assets instead of selling them, and eventually pass that wealth forward. Together, these three moves are known as the buy, borrow, die strategy. The first move behind this strategy begins with something that sounds simple: buying. But for the ultra-wealthy, buying does not mean purchasing expensive cars, luxury watches, or things that lose value over time. Their focus is on buying ownership. Instead of trading their time for money, they put their money into assets that have the potential to grow. A founder may own shares of a company. An investor may own real estate, businesses, or other valuable assets. These possessions are not just things they own. They are the foundation of their growing wealth. This is where the difference between being rich and becoming extremely wealthy starts to appear. A high-income person can earn millions every year, but their wealth is connected to how much money they make. An asset owner, however, can see their fortune increase as the value of their ownership grows. For example, if someone owns a large portion of a company and that company becomes more valuable, their net worth can rise by billions without them receiving a traditional paycheck. The money exists as wealth, not as regular income. This is why the wealthiest individuals often prioritize ownership over consumption. They understand that the biggest fortunes are usually not created by spending money, but by controlling valuable assets that can continue producing value over time. But owning these assets creates another challenge. As wealth grows, selling those assets can become an expensive decision. The moment they turn their ownership into cash, they may lose future growth and create financial consequences they have spent years avoiding. And this leads to the next part of the strategy: finding a way to use enormous wealth without giving up the assets that created it. For most people, having a valuable asset means one thing: eventually turning it into cash. A house can be sold, a business can be sold, and investments can be converted into money when needed. But for the ultra-wealthy, selling is often viewed as the last option, not the first. The reason is that their assets are not just valuable possessions. They are engines that can continue creating more wealth. A company's stake can increase in value, generate influence, and provide opportunities that disappear the moment ownership is given up. Imagine owning a piece of a company that grows from $1 billion business into a $100 billion empire. Selling that ownership might give you a huge amount of money today, but it also means losing your connection to the future growth of that company. This creates a unique challenge for the richest people in the world. Their wealth may be enormous on paper, but accessing that wealth by selling can change their entire financial position. The asset that made them wealthy is also the asset they want to protect the most. This is why many wealthy individuals separate the idea of being rich from having cash available. They do not always need to convert their fortune into money because their ownership itself provides power, opportunities, and financial flexibility. The question then becomes, if selling is not the preferred option, how do the ultra-rich access money when they want to spend, invest, or expand their lifestyle? The answer comes from the second part of this strategy, using the wealth they already have in a completely different way. When most people need money, they usually think about one solution: earning more. They work longer hours, look for higher-paying jobs, or sell something they own to create cash. But for the ultra-wealthy, there is another option that changes the entire equation. Instead of selling their valuable assets, they can use those assets as a source of financial power. This is where borrowing enters the strategy. A person who owns a significant amount of valuable assets can often use those assets as security to receive a loan. The bank is not looking at their salary or monthly paycheck the way it would for an average borrower. It is looking at the value behind the loan, the assets they already control. This creates a different relationship with money. The wealthy individual receives cash that can be used for expenses, investments, or new opportunities, while still keeping ownership of the original assets. The important detail is that a loan is not treated the same way as income. Income is money earned through work or business activity, while borrowed money is a financial obligation that must be repaid. Because of this difference, borrowing can provide access to cash without creating the same situation as selling an asset. This is why borrowing against wealth has become a powerful tool among people who have accumulated significant assets. They are not necessarily spending their fortune piece by piece. They are using their existing wealth as leverage. But this strategy also raises a bigger question. If someone keeps borrowing against their assets instead of selling them, how does this cycle continue over many years? That final piece reveals why this approach is known as one of the most debated wealth strategies in the world. Once someone has built a large enough asset base, the way they think about spending money changes completely. For most people, spending is connected to what they have earned and what is sitting in their bank account. But for the ultra-wealthy, spending decisions are often connected to how efficiently they can use the wealth they already control. A billionaire may own valuable assets worth billions, but selling a portion of those assets every time they need money would slowly reduce the foundation of their fortune. Instead, they can use financial tools that allow them to access cash while keeping their long-term ownership position. This creates a system where their lifestyle and their wealth growth can move in opposite directions. They can have access to enormous amounts of money while their original assets continue to exist and potentially increase in value. The key idea is that they are not treating their wealth like a normal bank account. They are treating it like a resource that can be strategically managed. Every decision is designed around protecting ownership, maintaining control, and allowing their assets to continue working over time. This is one of the biggest differences between simply having money and understanding how wealth operates at the highest level. The goal is not just to accumulate a fortune, but to create a structure where that fortune can continue supporting opportunities, investments, and future generations. But even this strategy has a final step, one that determines what happens to all of this accumulated wealth when the person who built it is no longer there. The final part of this strategy is the one that gives it its name. What happens when the wealth creator is no longer alive? For most people, death marks the end of their financial journey. But for the ultra-wealthy, it can become another stage in the process of preserving and transferring wealth. Over decades, wealthy individuals often build structures around their assets to decide how their fortune will move from one generation to the next. Instead of simply leaving behind cash, they pass on ownership, investments, and valuable assets that can continue growing after they are gone. This is where long-term wealth planning becomes extremely important. A fortune that took decades to build can be protected through careful decisions about how assets are managed, transferred, and maintained over time. The goal is not only to create wealth, but to make sure that wealth survives beyond a single lifetime. A successful business, a portfolio of investments, or ownership in valuable companies can continue influencing future generations long after the original creator is gone. This is why the final step creates so much debate. Supporters argue that building and preserving wealth across generations is a natural part of financial planning. Critics argue that these strategies can allow enormous fortunes to remain concentrated among a small group of families for decades. And this brings us to the bigger question behind the entire system. Is this simply a smart way to manage wealth, or does it create an advantage that most people will never have access to? The buy, borrow, die strategy sits at the center of one of the biggest debates in modern finance. To some people, it represents a smart approach to managing wealth, a system built around ownership, planning, and using financial tools that already exist. From this perspective, the strategy is not about avoiding responsibility. It is about understanding how money works and making decisions that preserve assets over the long term. After all, many financial strategies used by individuals and businesses are designed to improve efficiency and protect value. But critics see the situation differently. They argue that when only a small group of people can use these techniques at a massive scale, it creates a gap between those who own valuable assets and those who rely mainly on income from work. The debate is not only about taxes. It is about the structure of wealth itself, who has access to opportunities, who can use financial systems to their advantage, and why some people are able to grow their fortunes faster than others. This discussion has made the strategy one of the most controversial topics in personal finance. It forces people to ask a deeper question. Is wealth simply the result of better financial knowledge and decision-making, or does having access to certain tools create an advantage from the beginning? Understanding both sides of the debate is important because the world of money is rarely as simple as winners and losers. Behind every financial system are rules, incentives, and choices that shape how wealth is created and maintained. The biggest lesson from this entire system is not simply about taxes, loans, or billion-dollar fortunes. It is about understanding that money behaves differently depending on where you stand in the financial world. For many people, money is something they earn, spend, and save. But at the highest levels, money becomes something that can be structured, managed, and positioned to create new opportunities. The gap between ordinary financial decisions and those made by the ultra-wealthy often comes down to one thing: perspective. They think beyond the next paycheck, the next purchase, or the next expense. They think about control, ownership, and the long-term impact of every decision. But this does not mean every person can simply copy the strategies of billionaires. The tools available to someone with billions in assets are not the same tools available to someone just starting their financial journey. The real advantage comes from understanding the principles behind wealth, knowing how money moves, recognizing the value of long-term thinking, and learning how financial systems influence the choices people make. Because the world of money is not only about how much you earn. It is also about how you understand the rules of the game. And once you understand those rules, you begin to see wealth in a completely different way. Throughout history, the people who understood financial systems were often the ones who created the greatest opportunities for themselves. The methods of building wealth may change over time, but the importance of financial knowledge remains the same. The biggest advantage is not simply having access to more money. It is having the ability to understand how money moves, how decisions create consequences, and how the financial world operates beyond what most people see. Because in the end, wealth is not only about what you own. It is about understanding the system that shapes how wealth is created, protected, and passed forward.